all you can do, just do your best, learn from your mistakes. When you have a failure, learn from it, get up and keep moving forward. Because in the end, what matters most is if you keep moving forward or if you give up. And you can't give up. You got to keep moving forward.
Someone cares about you.
There's a reason why your heart is beating.
You still have a purpose.
Don't give up.
It's important to know that you're not alone.
You're not alone.
You're not alone. You are not alone.
Walking a mile is a great way to better your day and improve your outlook on life. And today, I'm stoked to talk to two Army veterans that are best friends and have an awesome perspective on the things that matter most to them. Joel Strasser and Garrett Smith. Together, Joel and Garrett were the runners-up on season 35 of The Amazing Race, which is one of Leanne and my favorite shows. And when we saw how supportive these two men were of each other and their competitors, we knew that we had to have them on the show. Joel and Garrett, welcome to the 1 Mile, 1 Veteran podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thanks
much
for having us, Danny.
Absolutely. As our listeners start tracking their walk with the Strava app, first, so that they can get an idea of who you are, before you answer this first question, say, hey, I'm Joel. Hey, I'm Garrett. Could you share with us why did you decide to join the Army in the first place?
You want to go?
Sure. This is Joel. There's a military tradition in my family. My grandparents, my dad, my uncle, my brother, cousins, a lot of people have joined different branches of the military in my family. And so it was always something that was like an option in my mind. And I remember when I was in high school, I was like, I think I'm supposed to go to college, but I don't have any money for it. And it would be really convenient if I joined the Army to pay for college, and just kind of upheld that family tradition as well. So that's what I decided to do. Join military police corps. I remember I couldn't decide what I wanted to do when I grew up, but it kind of felt like I would want to be a cop, which by the way, I did not do. I never became a cop except for in the Army, because I joined the Idaho National Guard in the military police. And going from there, I think that one of the best things that happened when I joined is I met some really good people, Smythe included, but lots of good people in my platoon. And it was really, I'm just really glad that I took the path that I took, even though I wasn't sure why I was taking it 100% at the time.
Okay, and so this is Garrett, and similar with me, or with Strasser, my family, so my dad actually ended up retiring in the military. He was a full bird colonel by the time he retired. And so, I grew up just having that in my life, the military kind of background in my life. And the funny thing is, I never cared to join. And it was interesting because a lot of my dad's buddies would be like, so I have 4 brothers. There's 5 boys in my family. And none of us were planning on joining the military. All of his buddies would give him a hard time, why are your kids wanting to join the military? And it was funny because I never had that desire. But then for whatever reason, as I started getting, I was probably 21 years old, 22 years old. And that's when I actually started thinking about it. And then 9/11 happened. And it was actually that month, the end of that month, that I actually signed and joined. And I'm not trying to say that I'm like, I joined because of the terrorist attack, but I feel like that did have some persuasion in my decision. Like, when you see something like that devastating happen to the country that I love, it's like, what can I do, to kind of help out? And so I joined the end of September of 2001, and man, it was like Strasser said, the people that I ended up meeting, and Strasser and I met shortly after I joined. He had joined before me, but we met shortly after I joined. And right away, we just hit it off. We ended up becoming good buddies from the very start. And so, my life wouldn't be what it is without having that military background.
That's awesome. And legacy military members and veterans having the family background of it, but still 2 completely different reasons to actually go in. And you guys eventually came together. How did your friendship end up forming? And then also you got to give us a little background on why from Smith to Smythe. Because
oh yeah, let's forget that. So there were so his name is Garrett Smith, but I never say that because in our platoon there were 3 Smiths, and they can't all be Smith. So one became Smitty, one became Red, and then Garrett became Smythe, and it stuck. And everybody in our platoon calls him Smythe still to this day. we're not in the Army anymore, but whenever we have contact with anyone else, he's still Smythe, and I'm still Strasser. But now I can't even remember what was the first question.
Well, so even our kids call us by that name. Like,
yeah.
So his kids call me Smythe. My kids call him Strasser. I mean, I have a little 4-year-old, and she's like always, when are we going to see Strasser again? And so, I mean, that's just who we are now. And it's been that way for over 20 years, and it'll always be that way.
I just remembered the actual original question, though. When we joined the Army and we ended up in the same platoon, we didn't initially have a lot in common with a lot of the other guys in the platoon. So we kind of gravitated toward each other. We came from similar backgrounds, similar families. We both have a religious background. And a lot of the guys, we actually developed our relationships with them later when we got deployed. But we just hit it off and became good buddies just right off the bat. Right
on. And while you guys were in and deploying, what was the time in service like? Where'd y'all go? What types of missions did you embark upon? And of course, being good friends, what type of antics did you find yourself in?
Yeah, well, so the funny thing is, I actually was on a deployment. It was a local deployment. It was part of Operation Enduring Freedom, where we were helping out the Air Force Base nearby with security. And so they activated a bunch of the MPs to help the active duty Air Force guys that were doing security police for the base. And so I did that, and he was still in school at the time, and so he wasn't able to join me on that because he was trying to finish up his degree. And after that deployment ended is when we got deployed for Iraq. And so I had to sign a waiver to volunteer to go on that deployment because I was just coming off of another one. But I wanted to go because I knew he was going, and we already were forming that friendship, and so we knew we could be there for each other. And so when that whole deployment happened, we're doing some training before leaving, and I ended up injuring my shoulder to the point where they just said, we don't have enough time to rehab it to get you on the deployment. And so they ended up sending me home to do all the rehab on my shoulder. And so in the end, I didn't get to go on that deployment with Strasser. The full deployment was 18 months, but they had us spend the first 6 months in Texas and New Mexico. And it was during that he got hurt. He made it through almost that whole first 6 months. And then we had 1 year in Iraq after that. And that's where we kind of split off. And Smythe went home. I went with the platoon to Iraq. We were in Kirkuk in northern Iraq. And while there, our platoon did mostly convoy security. We drove all around northern Iraq. We were escort trucks, gun trucks for convoys. We also did some prison operations also. But the thing that happened was we missed out on that adventure together. The first 6 months of training, that wasn't the adventure we were looking for. Mm-hmm. And so we are now we're not in the same place. I'm in Iraq, he's home. But the Armed Forces Network had the Amazing Race on that you could watch. I remember it was season 8, and it was the first time I ever watched it before. I tuned in, and I got hooked on it, and I was watching it as often as I could. And I was saying, dude, I'm going to be on the show someday. I can totally do this. And I was looking around in my platoon like, who can do this with me? And I was talking to different buddies in the platoon. Meanwhile, Smythe, you were back home watching it also. Yeah, and I can't believe that he was asking other people to join him on the and he gets home and he starts telling me, oh yeah, I want to go on the Amazing Race. I'm trying to find somebody. I'm like, what do you mean you're trying to find somebody? I'm right here. He speaks French, I speak Spanish, and my thought was we could get along in a lot of countries throughout the world. We have a great relationship, great friendship. And I'm like, it should be us doing the Amazing Race together. And so that's what put the seed in, and it wasn't for another 15, 16 years before we finally were in a position where we applied for it. Right. We put it off. We talked about it for years, but we're both from Boise, Idaho, but I didn't live here in the Boise area. I moved with work, and then I was all over the place. And when we get together, we'd talk about, hey, we should apply on the Amazing Race, but never got around to it until I moved back to Boise. And then once we lived in the same spot, we got serious about it. And so we're a little past our prime. It would have been maybe been better if we got on the show 20 years ago. Yeah. But we still went. We still did all right. So, and that was the big thing for us is now we're in our mid 40s and we're not in the best shape, and we're going to have to compete against a bunch of 20-year-old kids. Like, can we really do this? But I mean, we can give it a shot. Why not put yourself out there and see what happens?
That's really awesome that 15 years of preparation to get to that point where you actually applied. My wife and I talk about it kind of, it's probably in a very similar fashion of like, when's the right time in life? So what was the catalyst? What was the right time in your life finally to say, I'm going to apply? And then how long did it take before you finally got accepted?
A lot of times I think we feel like we need to wait for the right time, but is there really ever a right time? You know? And so I think a big thing for us is I have a daughter that has special needs. She has cerebral palsy and Down syndrome, and she's deaf. And I was watching her as she grew up. I didn't know if she would ever walk. I didn't know if she'd be able to feed herself. I didn't know how much it was going to hold her back. And then we had another daughter who's 4, and my special needs daughter's 8, so she's quite a bit younger. But once my 4-year-old started running around the house and jumping off the couch, Brinley, my special needs daughter, started doing the same thing. And she started following her around and jumping off the couch. And I'm thinking, I let things hold me back. And look at her, different disabilities that she has that could hold her back, but she doesn't let it hold her back. And that's kind of when we started thinking, we might be in our mid 40s and overweight, but why are we going to let that hold us back? Why not just put ourselves out there and not let things hold us back in life? And so that's when we started talking about it.
If we waited until we felt like we were prepared to the point that we could win, we probably never would have done it. And we actually went into it with a lot of confidence.
Yeah.
But then I remember that when we first saw all the other teams at the very beginning and we're looking around, we're like, oh man, what did we get ourselves into? Like, there were some really good and competitive looking and strong teams. But back to your question about the applying part. So we applied in January of 23. We finally got together and made our application video, sent it in. And I did not expect to hear back from the show. I had applied for Survivor a couple times and never heard back. And I figured this would be the same thing. So I thought, okay, that's fun. We made an application. We sent it in. And a month later, so February of 23, we heard back, and we were so excited just to hear back, just to have somebody from the show reach out and say, hey, we want to talk to you a little more. And what we didn't know at the time was they were reaching out to quite a few more people than were actually going to make it on the show. Like, they started with a big pool, and over the next 3 or 4 months, they whittled that candidate pool down to the final teams that you saw on the show. But it was a lot of work. The application process, I feel like it's the toughest job interview ever. It's just ongoing, and there's so many appointments and paperwork and tasks you had to perform, and it just went on and on. But it was actually kind of fun because every time they gave us a list of, okay, now we need you to do these things, it was like, okay, we made it to the next phase. We made it to the next phase. And and
every time we passed a phase, I had this confidence, like, we made it, we're on, we're going to make the show. And then they would reach out and say, okay, now we still need you to do all this stuff. And then I started thinking, okay, there's still a lot of people in this, and I don't know if we made the show or not. And so it was a big roller coaster ride, to be honest with you.
Yep. But we finally found out that we were cast for the show. It was at late April.
Yeah.
And then we started filming in early June or mid-June. So, yeah.
That's a lot of stress to just like take upon yourself for a potential to go do something that seems like so dream worthy, and also something that is going to be stressful. One of the gripes that my wife and I have sometimes when watching the show is when we watch teams start to deteriorate and start to like they let the stress get the better of them. And one of the things that stood out about your team and some of the most successful teams is that the stress never becomes so overwhelming that they start to break down the cohesiveness of the team. How do you manage that? I mean, because you're not just dealing with like the stress of the race, but like you mentioned, Garrett, you have, a special needs daughter back home. You have family back home that you're missing for a month or two while you're away on this adventure.
That's one great thing about Strasser is he did a lot of research in the show. And like you said, the top tier teams are ones that can maintain confidence under that stress. The people that don't let the stress get to them. And because of that, we knew going in that if you keep your composure, you just have a better chance with everything. And so being that Strasser had studied the show and planned out, okay, these people are the ones that typically win. This type of person is who usually wins the show. I mean, we knew going into it what we were going to do.
I remember when we were finalists for casting, and we made it to the final interview, and they asked us in that final interview, like, what is your strategy? How are you going to be successful on the show? And I said something to the effect of, we get along well and we work together well. And I found the secret to winning. And then Bertram, he's the one who created the show. He started the whole thing, and he's there at every episode, directing every episode. He was like, "Oh, you have, huh? Well, tell me, what is the secret to the show?" And I told him, people who can get along and work together well and keep a positive and happy attitude do better than the people who don't. And he was like, "Oh, he kind of did figure it out," So.
and I mean, that's something that, just because you might have seen us always positive and happy and relatively stress-free on the show, that's not to say that stress doesn't get to us, because it does. But I think it really helps to have somebody in your corner, to have a teammate that you can rely on. Maybe when I'm getting stressed out, he's going to crack a joke to bring those stress levels down. Maybe when he's stressing out, I'm, going to make fun of him and he'll laugh about it, And so you got to have somebody in your corner that you can rely on, that you just know, can help you through those stressful situations.
That's really awesome. How would you go about suggesting, because I know that I run into this problem and talking with my younger brothers and my dad even, because I used to think I was alone in feeling like I was making the right types of connections, even with the people closest to me. I felt like I was either, too far away, not spending enough time with them, and not calling them enough. So when it came to reaching out during a time of stress or a time of turmoil, I felt like I hadn't put in the work to warrant that type of call of saying, "Hey, dad, hey, bro, I'm in a tough spot, or I'm going through this thing. Can you help me out?" How do you know when you have that partner that you could just call up and uh, and say, "Hey, Strasser, hey, Smythe, family's having a hard time, and I just need somebody to talk to."
I mean, I think a lot of that is just learned over time. A lot of times, I think as humans, we have a hard time reaching out for help. A lot of times we might feel like, no, I need to figure this out on my own. I need to deal with this on my own. But I think you just have to build those relationships. I mean, you have to be willing to be vulnerable with people. There was a situation early on in our lives where when my daughter was born, the one that has special needs, she actually basically died in the womb and had to be revived. She received CPR for 4 minutes, and we're in the NICU for a month. And it was just such a horrible time in our lives. It was so difficult. But I had a flashback to Strasser and one of his daughters that went through a very similar experience when she was young, where he spent time in the NICU and he almost lost his daughter, and they had to do CPR and all that. And so I knew he was somebody I could reach out to. He had been through basically the same situation. He's somebody that knows what I'm feeling. He's somebody that knows what I'm going through. And so I can reach out to him and ask him for his advice. What did you do, or how did you get through it? And so you just have to find those people in your life that you can trust and can help you through those difficult times.
That's awesome. One of the things that really stood out to us, being able to watch you over the course of 3 or 4 months. I forget how long seasons are on TV for, especially with streaming options. But one of the things that stood out was, when you had when you had an opportunity to make a wish in Vietnam. Most people went in there and they wrote what you would expect. I want to be able to win this race. I want to be able to win this leg. But you guys made a different wish. You made a wish for your families, and something that wasn't directly tied to that specific event. Would you mind sharing a little bit about your family's impact during your time on The Amazing Race, and how that continues to be a motivator to continue to accomplish and reach some of the goals that you do, like, setting Guinness World Records and stuff?
Well, okay, so when you're on The Amazing Race, the first thing that happens when you arrive in LA is they take your phone away. And so you have no contact the whole time. So it was about a month that we had no contact with our families at all. And so that Vietnam leg, I think that was leg 4 of the race. So we're still fairly early in the race, but we've already been away from our family almost 2 weeks at that point,
Yeah.
I think, because there's a week at the start before you even start filming that you're doing other like orientation and stuff. So we hadn't seen them for a while. Plus, that leg happened to be filmed on Father's Day. So, and we knew it was Father's Day, but we didn't. I've got 4 kids. He's got 5 kids. We are away from them, and so that was like every part of the race up to that point was go, 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 big stress. And then we finally get to a part where it's like you had to slow down. Mm-hmm. You're in a temple. You're not supposed to run in there. You're supposed to keep your voice quiet. And so you go in and you're respectful and everything slows down. I mean, we had just gotten done carrying those heavy mattresses and we were so exhausted. But we get in there and they told us to make a wish. And independently, we both were like, oh, we're just thinking about our families right now. So we made a wish that our families would be doing good. We wished we could call them, but we couldn't. So that was the only thing we could think of. And one cool thing about that temple, I don't know if it showed it well enough in the show to understand, but your wish was placed inside this spiral-shaped piece of incense. And they would light the end of the incense and then hang your wish up on the ceiling. And the incense would burn around your wish over the course of several hours. And then the smoke went up through a vent in the ceiling or in the roof. And that was like your wish being brought up to heaven. And I thought that was a really cool image. But yeah.
Well, just the whole Father's Day thing, really makes you focus on your family, because that's all you're thinking about is your wife and your kids. And lucky for us, our wives are very supportive. When it came to even applying to be on the show, you always hope that you're going to make it, even though you don't know if you really will. But the first thing, when Strasser and I finally decided, okay, we're going to apply, the first thing I did was talk to my wife, and I said, hey, what do you think? We want to apply, but what do you think about us doing this? Because obviously, we knew we'd be gone for a while. We wouldn't have any contact. And my wife right away said, yeah, I think you guys should do it. I think it'd be awesome. His wife, same thing. They're very supportive. They're also great friends. So luckily they, every Sunday they got together for a family meal together with all of our families. And so they kind of supported each other as we were away. We were able to try to support each other also. And that the episode on Father's Day, and of course they didn't say it was Father's Day. They don't want to date the show, but we had the opportunity to read some letters that our kids had snuck into our bags for us to open on Father's Day. That was the whole purpose. When the show found those letters, they confiscated them and said, you can't be taking that. But then they did say, we're going to go through, if it's okay with you guys, we're going to go through and make sure there's not any contraband in there. You can't be writing different languages down and like cheats, on the show. Once they went through them, they gave them back to us and said, we're going to give them back to you. If you guys are okay with it, we'd like you to open them up on camera when you open them. And we were totally fine with that. And because we knew we'd be gone on Father's Day. And so it just worked out great that Father's Day where we read the letters was also the same day that we made a wish that our families would be okay while we were away.
I'm starting to get sad.
That's absolutely beautiful. I love it. Yes, wipe the tears. It's all right. Beard's its own character, right?
Yeah.
No, but that's absolutely incredible that worked out that way. I mean, talk about a serendipitous moment, especially that sounds like you're not quite halfway into the race. You didn't know that you were going to go the whole time. Obviously, you're optimistic, and I remember the mattress carries and. I think that was like one of your guys' like biggest physical struggles too, was getting through that crowded, hot street and then going up those stairs. How did those letters and your family's support really help drive you forward and give you the motivation to carry on those next 3 weeks?
There's power in it. I pulled those letters back out of my bag multiple times at the hotel between legs. And looking at like the pictures that my daughter drew and the kind words that my kids wrote, it elevated me, my spirits, all of it. In a way, it was almost like an unfair advantage having that letter from my kids. Not that no one else could have done it, but and there were other parents on the show. I think there were 3 other teams that were parents, or there were some that was a parent and a child together. But we were super lucky that our families thought to create those letters for us and sneak them into our bags, and then the show let us keep them. And it was almost like a little power up, a little boost when we would pull those out and reread them and look at them again.
It was nice because you start to feel like, oh, should I be doing this? I'm just basically on a game show and leaving my kids and wife behind. Should I be doing this? But when you can read a letter from your kids that say, don't worry about us, we'll be fine. You and Strasser just run the race the best you can, and kind of cheering us on from home. That's a lot of motivation that it gives you as far as continuing on and pushing forward.
That's really awesome. And by the time you made it to that final leg, I can only imagine like there's this level of exhaustion, but also elation to say like I've done something. I've made it through the screening process. Well, first I got the courage to apply, but then I made it through the screening process, made it through all of these incredible legs, but you're up against 2 absolutely incredible teams. I mean, one of the teams just seemed like they were not going to be stopped no matter what. And you ended up being the runners up like against those two teams. That's so impressive. What was it like to come home having accomplished every single leg of the amazing race?
The whole thing is an emotional roller coaster, like you were saying. It's I remember after that leg ended and we finally got back to the hotel, and they were giving us our flight information to go home and all this, and we finally got a chance. We got our phones back. Finally got a chance to call home. It was what, 2 or 3 a.m. or something like that at the time. Like, it was early in the morning. But we weren't going to wait to call home, so we called home right away, woke our families up, and I remember when I heard my wife say hello, I couldn't talk. Tears started swelling up in my eyes, and I just sat there like I'm gonna start crying now. I mean, just thinking about it. But I just had something in my throat. I just could not get any words out, and it took me a little bit before I finally was able to speak. But I mean, yeah, it was just, the whole thing is such an emotional roller coaster. And then the fact that we made it to the end, made it to the last leg, we dominated that last leg. The 3 challenges leading up to the final challenge, I mean, we developed a significant lead on everyone else. And so, I mean, when all was said and done, we really felt like we were one of the top teams on the show, even though a lot of people might not agree. I mean, we felt really good about how we did in that final leg. And so, I mean, it's something to be proud of. We didn't win the whole thing, but like you said, we were competing against the top tier teams in the end. So we felt pretty good with how it turned out.
When I got home from filming the show, so this was, early July, and it wasn't going to start airing until September. We didn't have a big group of people we could talk to. The only people who knew the outcome were us and our wives. None of our kids knew the outcome. None of our other friends knew the outcome. And it was, okay, so for me, I had kind of a seesaw in my mind. Sometimes I was super excited about how well we did and how we got all the way to second place. We never got eliminated. We got to do the entire race. But then other times I was thinking, we came so close to winning, and I made a mistake that cost us the win, and I would get down on myself. And I would be like, we came within like between 1 and 2 minutes of winning the whole thing. And so if my focus was there, I was in the dumps. If my focus was like how great we did, then I was just feeling elated. And it was a back and forth struggle for me. And then once the show started airing, kind of that seesaw kind of went away, and I was just enjoying the show, and I was like having fun watching every episode. And then when I watched that final episode, it kind of came back. The negativity came back for me a little bit, where I was just like, oh man, look how close we were. And when you watch it, it's very clear that we had an opportunity to win that final challenge and win the whole thing. And I was like, no, I think it's this way, And so I had to make a conscious decision to control my thoughts, because if I didn't, I would sit there and I would start to stew, and I would start to think about this one little mistake that cost us the win, which is not the right thing to be thinking about. The right thing to be thinking about is there's like so many positives, yet sometimes I still get sucked into negativity, and I still think about that. So it's an interesting thing, and I still struggle with it sometimes, but having Smythe here as my buddy to help me and support me has just been awesome for me. And it's really helped me to keep my focus in the right place.
Well, the thing is, he always puts a lot of pressure on himself because of the way that ended with, mixing up those two. But if I had any confidence in the other way, I would have said, no, I think it's this other way. And so it's on me as much as it's on him. We were a team that whole time, and I didn't know the answer for sure, and he didn't know the answer for sure. And so, in the end, that's what happened. And really, when you think about it, Greg and John at the glass blowing studio, I think it was like their first attempt. They made the perfect glass ball. It snapped off perfectly. Everything was perfect. It was just that much too small. So had they nailed that on their first attempt, they would have led that whole final leg without a chance of us catching up. So that one mistake messed them up. Corey and Rob, they did awesome through all the challenges. They just got lost on the way to the kayaks. So had they not done that, they would have been fine. Every one of us made mistakes here and there, and you can't say, well, because of this we lost, because they can also say, well, because of this we lost, because of this. You can beat yourself up forever. All you can do, just do your best, learn from your mistakes. When you have a failure, learn from it, get up and keep moving forward, because in the end, what matters most is if you keep moving forward or if you give up. And you can't give up. You got to keep moving forward.
Yep.
That's the amazing perspective that you guys have, especially together. When we talk about relationships and missed opportunities or perceived failures and things not getting done the way that we expected them to do, there is this unfortunate opportunity that comes about that people take advantage of to pass the blame. And with a show like The Amazing Race, where they use sound effects to highlight mistakes and punctuate points very clearly, you guys are in a very unique position to look back and go, if we just would have done this differently, if we just would have picked the right kayak and been certain about it. Because listen to the audible clues, but those clues aren't there. The hindsight is 2020, and with you guys, it's going to be like 2010 because there's other people watching and pointing it out. But when it comes to your relationship, you're still sitting right next to each other. You're still supportive of one another, and even so much, like a large portion of your motivation to do this race, at least I know for you, Garrett, was to hopefully be able to get a service dog for your special needs daughter. And when you didn't win the $1 million prize money that came along with it, I understand something happened within your community that still helped you out, and you didn't lose out on that opportunity.
Yeah, I think that was one of the biggest struggles for Strasser, is because he felt like it was because of him that now my daughter can't get a service dog. And so that was actually, when we look back on everything, again, hindsight's 2020, if things had worked out any other way, it wouldn't have been the right way. The way that things worked out were a bigger blessing to everyone, not just me, not just my daughter, but to a lot of people because of the way it worked out. You want to explain?
Sure. So it was in the second to last episode, I think, where Smythe mentioned in the show, because they asked us, what would you do if you won? And he explained, I have a daughter who has some special needs, but the dog that she would need is super specialized. It's not your average service dog. And he said the first thing we're doing is getting her the dog that she needs. And people online, people on social media, they noticed that. They picked up on it. And people started saying things like, if these guys don't win, someone's got to make sure they get their dog. Well, I knew we didn't win. And there was still one episode left, so I couldn't say anything, right? But I created an online fundraiser. And after the show aired, after the finale aired, I published it. And I stuck it on the Amazing Race Facebook fan page. And it blew up. And everybody started sharing it and donating to it. Some big name people with big followings stuck it out there on their platform. And it just grew and grew. And we raised the money for Brinley's dog in less than 4 days. That really pumped me up because like Smythe mentioned, I felt like, if I hadn't have made one stupid mistake, she would have had her dog. Well, she is getting her dog. Now it's a reality. And a lot of people, when they would donate, they would make these beautiful comments, these super kind comments about us and about Smythe's daughter and about just inspirations and things. And so much goodness came from that wouldn't have come otherwise. You know, if we had have won, we wouldn't have received that outpouring of kindness from everybody.
A lot of times when you're going through difficult times in your life, I feel like you end up turning your focus internally. Like you just think about yourself and you know what you're going through, your struggles and your heartaches and all that. But in those moments, if you can find a way to look at others and to seek after helping others, what a blessing that is in your life. That can pull you out of a lot, to change your focus from yourself to other people. And so the fact that all these people had the opportunity to come together to help out my daughter, I think was such a huge blessing for everybody. Like, had we won the $1 million, we got the dog, that's the end of it. The story's over. But because we didn't, look how many people got to bless my daughter's life coming together and making this happen. And I mean, it's such a much better impact on everyone's life than had we won the $1 million. That's how we feel about it.
That's so beautiful. You know, one of the things that we talk about often on this show is people's willingness to help others. It's a huge proponent of why we do what we do. It's why we sold our home so that we could produce this for at least 2 years without having to worry about an income, and say, hey, like, we want to give something to the world that we know is helpful, and we want other veterans to have an opportunity to share their journey and their stories with others, and maybe some tips that they've learned. And what is it that you guys do for your own mental and mental health and overall well-being to continue to have positive perspectives even in the face of doubt and criticisms?
I think family is so important. Being surrounded by a good family, and by the way, no families are perfect. So whether it's your spouse, your kids, your siblings, your immediate family, or your extended family, I think every family has strengths and has drama, but you can receive so much goodness from having a good family unit. But then it goes beyond that. It goes to friends. It goes, sometimes your friends are your family. And it goes beyond that too. The power of prayer for me is so huge. Being able to turn to my Father, my Heavenly Father, you know, and speak to Him, and then receive direction from that. There's so many good sources of help when you need it, and another source that I've just recently decided to turn to, which I've never done before, is to talk to a counselor. It's funny because I think in my younger years, I used to think that talking to a therapist or a counselor or whatever was a show of weakness or something, that you couldn't take care of it yourself. And when I came home from filming The Amazing Race, I spent a lot of time thinking negatively about how it ended. And she would notice it when she would look at me. She could see that I was in my head, and she would tell me, like, she'd talk to me and stuff, and she'd say, but you should see a therapist and talk to him. And I was like, yeah, I probably should. And I kind of left it at that. And but then after the final episode aired, I got a call from The Amazing Race has a counselor, and she works for the show, and she called me. And she wanted to just say she was checking in to see how I'm doing, and offer that The Amazing Race would pay for some sessions if I wanted to go get counseling. And I was like, all right, I'm not putting it off anymore. I'm going to do it. So I haven't started yet. It's actually happening next week. But I'm going to go take advantage of that, and I'm going to do it. And I'm actually looking forward to it. And it's not, I finally understand that it's not a sign of weakness. It's actually a sign of strength. If you see a tool there that's available and you use that tool, you're making the right choice, and you're moving yourself in the right direction. So I'm actually super excited about it.
Yeah, I like what he said about family, and the other thing is families come in all shapes and sizes. You know, it might not be blood family, it might be a military family, it might be just friends that, you know, you can treat each other as family. And so, you got to get those family relationships, those bonds anywhere you can. Like it doesn't matter where it comes from. One thing that I love about your podcast is the 1 mile thing. If you're ever having a difficult time or you're not feeling good, you're feeling depressed or whatever, get out and walk a mile. Just being outside, you're pumping, your blood pumping, oxygen flowing through your veins. Do some breathing exercises that can help calm you down. I always tell my kids, especially my 4-year-old, she tends to get frustrated at times, and anytime she comes to me in frustration and is like going crazy, I just say, hold on, take some deep breaths so you can calm down. And she'll take those deep breaths, and then she'll talk to me calmly. It's hard to make decisions when you're thinking emotionally or when you're reacting emotionally. There's the emotional side of your brain and there's the logical side of your brain. They don't work at the same time. And so if you're in an emotional state, you got to do something to, breathe through it or whatever, so you can think logically before you make your decisions, because a logical decision is going to be the better decision. And so that's a big thing for me is making sure that you're taking time for yourself to get out of your emotional thoughts that might be going through your mind.
I love that, and thank you so much for bringing that to this episode. First, the just reiterating that getting a counselor, therapist, talk therapy is a tool that is provided to a lot of veterans, a lot of service members, and thankfully even contestants on The Amazing Race. It's amazing that they've set you up with that, because it's only going to make us stronger. Like when we're able to overcome a hurdle in our lives, we become that much stronger. And now we have new tools that we can use to pass on to others and help strengthen them. But sometimes, like you had just mentioned, Smythe, is take that breath. Let's not make an emotional decision. Let's not make a permanent decision based off of a temporary emotion, because our emotions will pass and they change like the wind blows. Somebody cuts us off, we're angry, and then a good song comes on the radio and we're pumped right back up again and back in our good mood. Like that's how quickly our emotions can just sway. Unfortunately, there's too many military service members, veterans, and people out there that are making permanent decisions based on these temporary emotions, and it's resulting in their death. Um, for anybody that's currently going through a struggle that could potentially lead them towards taking their own life or dying by suicide, do you have any message of hope that you would like to pass on to them?
There is so much goodness ahead, and it's hard to see that goodness and know that that's ahead of you when you're focused on the darkness that's in the present for you. You just have to believe. You have to know that there is so much happiness and goodness waiting for you, and that this dark period that you're in right now, it's only temporary. And by the way, it doesn't have to stick around. When I've been feeling depressed, sometimes there's this weird comfort in embracing the depression. It's like I want to be depressed longer for some reason, but that's a warped way of thinking. And when I do that, and when I recognize it, and I'm like, oh, why am I doing this? And I tell myself, there's so much goodness ahead. I don't know what it is right now. And I'm not going to know what it is as long as I'm thinking negatively. But if you can find it in you to put the negativity aside for a minute and start thinking about all the positives in your life, that goodness that's ahead of you will start to bloom right before you. It's there.
A lot of times I feel like when when I go through a difficult situation, the typical focus is, why do I have to go through what I'm going through right now? Like, why is this happening to me? And one twist I try to put on that is, what if I'm going through this difficult time because there's somebody else that's going to go through this difficult time or a similar situation that I could help out? Maybe a year down the road, maybe 6 months, maybe 10 years down the road, somebody is going to go through the same situation or another situation very similar, and they're going to need somebody there to help them get through that. And so maybe that's why I'm going through this situation. I got to fight through it. I got to find a way through it, whether you're reaching out for a counselor, whether you're reaching out to a friend, whether you shift your focus to somebody else, find a way so that you can help people going through that same situation and help them overcome, the struggles that they might be going through.
That's absolutely great. Smythe, Strasser, thank you both so much for your time here. And before we say our final goodbyes, where can people follow along with your journey, whether it's the service dog journey or Joel, your beard, your Guinness World Record winning beard and antics?
We're both on Instagram. Uh, we have a joint Instagram account that we created, but we each have our personal Instagrams as well. Also YouTube. I've been making YouTube videos for years that I think are really funny. I'm one of the few people that thinks they're really funny. Smythe thinks they're funny sometimes, but Smythe's joined me in recent months, and we make a lot of YouTube videos together. We just made one earlier today that will come out soon. But follow along, have fun with us. We keep it light, and if you, the Beard World Records, those are all on YouTube. You can see those on there as well.
My Instagram is the pesky Mr. Mustachio, and Strasser's is at Joel Nert, JoelNert, and then Joel and Garrett is our group one. And so yeah, you can follow us on there. You know, we're going to be putting out some updates with the service dog. Steve and Annalie, if you remember from the show, Steve's wife, Kathy, Annalie's mom. She helped us in researching different service dog companies, and so she's been a big part of helping us out. We found a place that we're going to get it trained now, and right now we're looking for the perfect puppy that can bond with my daughter, and hopefully this process will be starting soon. So yeah, we'll keep people updated.
That's absolutely amazing, amazing, amazing. And thank you both so much for joining us here on the 1 Mile, 1 Veteran podcast.
Thank you. We appreciate you having us.
It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. And for our listeners, remember, you can listen to the 1 Mile, 1 Veteran podcast on Wreaths Across America Radio, available on platforms like iHeartRadio, Odyssey, and the TuneIn app.